And I guess my job is to try to get you out of here on time. I will do that, actually. So you won't be staying late. I will end up cutting out some of what I was going to discuss, and so I'll probably also go a little faster than normal. What that means is you're not going to have a chance to ask any questions. We're not going to have much opportunity for interaction, but my email address is on your handouts, so please feel free. If you want to follow up on anything related to this topic, just drop me an email and I'll be happy to get back to you and converse with you on the topic. One thing before I begin, though, is on your program I'm listed as MD, and I don't want to misrepresent myself. I'm not MD. I'm PhD, and so I just needed to clarify that. And actually, my background is working with terminally ill patients as well as seriously ill patients and elders. My work began probably about 25 years ago with elders in a lot of different clinical sorts of settings, and continue to work now. In addition to my job at the university, I work at one of the VA hospitals, and I work with hospice patients and rehab patients, most of whom are elderly. And about 5 years ago, people that I worked with in different clinical sorts of settings said, you know, you always seem to cope really well with all of the stresses related to work, so how about you start training us, teach us what you know. And so that's how I started talking about this topic. And I know this is a big shift from what you've been dealing with the rest of the day, because you've been focusing on patient care. And now I just want you to take a couple minutes to shift gears and to start thinking about your care, because as you're working with your patients day in and day out, week after week, year after year, if you don't take care of yourself, then there's less and less and less of you to really meet the needs of your patients. And so my goal in a very short period of time is to, I guess, just whet your appetite and get you to start thinking about things that you can do to take better care of yourself. I believe that the folks at the distance sites have my handouts. That would be what's here on this sheet. Can anybody tell me if they have the handouts? They're shaking their heads? You don't know. Yeah, because I'm not going to mess with this if they have the handouts. It's in yours, but I don't know if the distance sites have it for sure. Is there any way somebody can let me know?
I think the coordinator should probably.
No. Okay, well, I'm just going to assume you have them. And what I'm going to do is skip some of the first slides. I'm not using the slides, actually, even to save time. I was just going to go to the handouts that you have. And what I'm going to do is skip down to physical signs of stress overload and grief overload. And the reason I always combine those two, and I know some of you are dentists, probably a lot of you are dentists today, and it's a different group from what I talked to here recently. Are you folks here all dentists? No. Dental residents? No. Occupational therapists?
Just 2 dentists.
Okay, just 2 dentists. Because if I had an audience solely of dentists, I would gear this talk very differently. But traditionally, I work with every other type of healthcare provider, and the issues are somewhat different because when you're dealing with other types of direct patient care, grief and loss become a much greater issue than it is for people who are doing dentistry work. And so those are both combined in my slides, but it pretty much applies whether or not we're talking about working with patients that are in situations where you're dealing with their losses and your own grief related to that, or just stress overload, so just whichever applies to you. But what I want you to do, I'm going to spend the first couple minutes helping you to get an idea of just where you stand in terms of your current stress level. Because what I find going all around the country talking about this topic is that a lot of care providers aren't even aware of the level of stress that they're dealing with. It's just you get up in the morning and you kind of go to work and you do your thing, and you can be terribly stressed out and not be aware of it, and that tends to be a typical pattern. And so what I want you to do is take a look at your handouts and go down to slide 4, physical signs of grief, overload, and stress, and we'll go through this real quickly. And what I want you to do is just start kind of checking off things that apply to you. For example, the chronic exhaustion and fatigue. That I hear from a lot of healthcare providers. In other words, you wake up in the morning and you're exhausted, instead of waking up in the morning and feeling refreshed, which is the way nature kind of intended things to be. So you wake up and you're fatigued. Frequent physical illness, that's colds, it's allergy attacks, it's GI disturbances, it's the migraines, the other headaches. I'm going to take these down assuming you've got the handouts. Change in sleep patterns, either sleeping too much, not sleeping enough, the weight loss or gorging and weight gain. Talk to people who do both. Some people become kind of immune to food and they can't stomach anything and keep it down. They lose weight. Other people tend to shove down their stress by eating a lot of food. So you may have some of those particular signs or symptoms of stress overload. Emotional signs tend to overlap a lot with symptoms of depression frequently. For example, the helplessness, the hopelessness, the apathy. You go to work and you don't have the enthusiasm, you don't have the same interest level, you don't have the same passion and love for your work that you had when you first started out in your profession. A lot of people feel detached from their patients and their patients' families. If we have more time, I would address that issue in more detail because some of us have been trained that clinical detachment is the way that you're supposed to practice, regardless of which branch of helping you're in. And I disagree with that vehemently. In fact, I would suggest that the opposite is true, and it's the people who've been trained to detach themselves clinically who tend to burn out the fastest and who tend to burn out the worst. It's the people who allow themselves to get deeply connected with their patients and who do some things to take care of themselves that tend not to burn out in the field. Anxiety, the guilt and shame, depression. A lot of people that I work with at the hospital don't even realize that they're depressed. And that's also including the staff that I work with. A lot of them are running around clinically depressed and they have no idea that they've actually gone that low and they're just kind of going through the motions. There are other emotional signs of stress overload. Bitterness, the numbness. Numbness is a real important thing to kind of hone in on because if you're feeling numbed out, then you've already passed the point of just being moderately stressed and you're probably already burnt out. If you just wake up and go to work and you're not feeling anything, you're kind of numbed out, you're real apathetic, that's a really bad sign that you've probably not taken very good care of yourself. Psychological distancing, not just from your patients, because I had mentioned that earlier, but from your family, from your friends. So when you get home at night, you know, the thought of the telephone ringing is just too much to deal with. It rings, you let the answering machine pick it up. You don't want to deal with people, you don't want to go out, you've lost contact with some of your friends. It's just one more burden. You know, your friends should be a replenishing sort of source of energy, but you view them kind of as a burden. And so that's kind of what I'm talking about there. Emotional exhaustion, I think, is the key one. Do you just feel wiped out? And when I give talks to large groups, it's a huge percentage. If I've got 300 people in the audience, I've got probably 200 plus that are saying, yeah, I'm just really emotionally wiped out. I'm emotionally exhausted. And that frequently accompanies depression also. How you doing so far? You're fine. You're all stress-free. Ah, great copers. Okay. Behavioral signs. Let's see how you're doing there. And the first one is mine. I take full credit for that one. The uncontrollable, unpredictable crying jags. I don't know if anybody in here has had that experience when you're watching a video or a movie, perhaps. No? A lot of the people that I work with in hospice and that work with caring for terminally ill patients have that experience. And you know, you're doing your job well, you're coping, you're taking care of yourself, but you find that, you know, you go and you watch Bambi and you're sobbing uncontrollably. That's an emotional release. That's a behavioral sign that you've got stuff pushed down that needs to come up when you're crying over, you know, you broke your fingernail, that sort of thing. Physical withdrawal from people, calling off work more and more frequently. I've got a couple coworkers that do that, and I know for a fact that they're incredibly stressed. They're heading down to the deep end, and you start to see people calling off more and more and more. Increased family and marital conflict is also a biggie. I hear a lot of people say, oh, my kids are driving me nuts, they're such a burden, and they're comparing their children's need level to the need level of their patients, which isn't probably going to compare when you've got people in crisis and dying, and your kid scrapes his knee and he's screaming uncontrollably. It's hard to have the same level of empathy when you're really just incredibly overstressed from your job. And people will talk about, oh my God, my spouse wants sex. How dare he? Oh my gosh, how does he think I could cope with that? That's going to lead to some marital discord eventually. And that should not be a source of stress. That's actually one wonderful source of self-nurturing that people can use for physical release of distress. So when that becomes a major burden, that's also a sign that there's something not quite right. Restlessness, the lack of focus or concentration. I hear that repeatedly, where people are just kind of spacey. I hear that from the nursing staff a lot, where they have to be super vigilant when they're dealing with medications and following up on the doc's orders, because they're just forgetting stuff. And they feel like, oh my gosh, here I am, I'm 40 and I'm already heading toward dementia. It's like, no, you're probably mildly depressed and you're overly stressed, and that's most likely what's going on. But that's real common. The last thing there I want to mention real briefly, it's the alcohol and or drug abuse. I want to mention that because you don't have to be looking at a major substance abuse problem. What I'm even talking about there that's more common for people is the situation where you're at work all day and you're not taking proper care of yourself throughout the day. You get home and you're wound about this tightly and you're ready to burst, and the only way you can unwind is to have a beer or a glass of wine or the martini or whatever. And you still can't get to sleep after that. You've unwound enough to deal with your kids, to deal with your spouse, to deal with whatever you have to take care of. But come bedtime, you still can't just let go and fall asleep. And so maybe you pop a Tylenol PM, and that knocks you out enough where maybe you can sleep. So none of this is highly addictive behavior. But if you need alcohol to unwind when you get home, if you need Tylenol PM or some other substance to help you sleep, then you have a problem. And what is happening there is that you aren't even recognizing the stress that you're obviously not dealing with, because that's not normative. That's not natural. You shouldn't need that. If you want it, fine, that's one thing. But if you can't unwind and can't sleep without it, then you're not managing your stress very well. And so that's something that I think a lot of people overlook, but it should be taken into account. Spiritual signs of stress overload are also real key. And when I work with my patients, I always try to hone in there, whether it's my medical patients or staff. I think that gives a big clue as to how far you've gone toward burnout, whether you're really managing well or not. And there are a couple things that are key. One is just, and it's hard to verbalize, and it's hard for my patients to verbalize it, it's just this overwhelming sense of a void, of feeling empty, of knowing that something is missing and knowing that something is wrong, but not having any idea what it might be. One of the doctors that I work with at the hospital, he and I were having a conversation last week, and I asked him, I said, do you really like being a physician? And he said, oh, if you had asked me that 4 months ago before I switched jobs and started working here at the hospital, I would have said no, not at all, and I was ready to give up medicine. Now that I'm at the hospital, I'm in a totally different place. And I said, well, can you elaborate? Can you give me a little more feedback? And he had been in private practice, and he was miserable. And the more I talked to him, the more I realized he was totally spiritually wiped out. And he was able to acknowledge that, I was down to ground level, and I did not enjoy medicine. I did not enjoy my patients. I felt like I had reached the complete, utter end of everything. And I decided I'd take this job. If this job didn't turn things around, then medicine was no longer for me, and I was going to drop out and choose another profession. If you're feeling that, I would say despondent. If you're feeling that much of a void in relation to what you're doing, then you're in a serious spiritual crisis, and it's stress related and it's burnout related. To kind of fit with that is the next thing, the loss of direction or meaning, not knowing which way to go. What are you supposed to be doing? People become real cynical when they've kind of lost that spiritual connection. And I'm not necessarily talking about a religious connection. I know people who are not religious whatsoever, but they are very deeply spiritual people. And so it may mean religion to you, and it may not. And for some people, their spirituality and their religiosity are very much intertwined. For others, it's a very separate thing. Being the martyr, another example of kind of being in spiritual crisis. And so I realize we're really short on time, so we don't have time to go into all of these things in very much depth. But just looking at those things, do you feel like you're doing okay? And if you're saying, oh yeah, I'm great, then hooray. You're atypical for sure, because probably out of a group of 300, I'd say probably 250, if they're all being honest that day, will tell me, you know what? I'm not doing as well as I thought. Once I started looking at these things, I realized I've been fooling myself. You know, I am not managing my stress in a way that is really conducive to me staying committed to my work and my family and every other component of my life 100%. I'm really kind of feeling depleted. And so what I want to do is talk about something that I call self-nurturing, because the way that I've found to help people manage their stress, whether it's in a week-long workshop, whether it's in a couple-hour workshop, what I do is target the 4 different areas we talked about. You know, your spiritual self, your physical self, your social self, your emotional, psychological self. All of those components are very much interactive. And you may have more signs of stress overload in one area than another. So let's say maybe physically you're totally just ignoring your needs, but you're taking care of yourself maybe spiritually. But my contention is you are very much a holistic being, and so if you're going to manage your stress, if you're going to self-nurture, then it has to be a holistic sort of process where you target all those areas of function. And so all that self-nurturing is you taking care of yourself in a holistic manner, doing things, not just trying to set aside 30 minutes at the end of each day, but squeezing it into your day throughout the day. Because the way that I think about this whole process, and actually I kind of stole this from a woman named Ellen Kreidman. She's a relationship expert. And she was talking about love. And I'm talking about taking care of yourself, but she uses a pitcher metaphor and says, you know, at the beginning of the day, you start out like a water pitcher, and you're filled up to the top. And everybody who needs things from you is a glass. So let's say you've got a couple kids and you've got a spouse. Well, right there, even before you start your work day, you know, these kids are asking things of you. You have to give of your energy. And so you're constantly pouring out. Let's say the water in the pitcher is your life force, your energy. And then your spouse needs something in the morning and you pour more out, then you get to work, and everybody needs something from you. And so you're continually pouring out your energy. You're giving that to everyone. What happens if you haven't put back into the pitcher throughout the day? It's empty. And so what are you giving people? Not much. I mean, you're going through the motions, but people are very much aware of whether or not you're really engaging them, whether or not you're really caring, whether or not you're really there. And so a lot of times, particularly with women, they'll say, yeah, but that's selfish. You know, you've been trained to put your kids first, your spouse first, everybody at work first. Think of it as selfish if you need to, but think of it as selfish in a good way, because you can't take good care of people if you're not taking good care of yourself. And so I'd like to take a couple minutes here and just talk about some of the ideas that I use personally. Some of these have come from people in workshops that I've given. Some of them may apply to you, some of them may not apply. Take what you can and just leave the rest. But in terms of physical self-nurturing, you all know that you ought to exercise. I mean, unless you've got some terribly debilitating physical condition where you can't do anything, then exercise is probably going to benefit you in terms of stress management. You know, there is the mind-body connection, and stress and depression that frequently accompanies high levels of stress for a lot of people both respond really well to physical exertion. You burn off some of that. But, you know, I'm not going to get into a lecture about exercise. Rest, sleep, relaxation. We tend to be a pretty sleep-deprived country, and I doubt that anybody in here gets the amount of sleep that you really need. You do. Oh, you don't. You do. That's good. You're not the typical American. The average person doesn't sleep enough for their body to feel relaxed. And then we try to relax at the same rate at which we do the rest of our lives. And so, you know, we're like, okay, now it's time to relax. Okay, I got to get it in 30 minutes. I got to do it really fast. Well, that's contrary to what relaxation really is. One of the things that I do with any patient that I see for anxiety, depression, or stress management, that I do for myself and that I do for all of my students in my stress management classes, is I get them doing guided imageries and visualizations. And I have really great success with people. Some of my patients that come to me with chronic pain, who have been in severe pain, unrelenting, not managed well with meds at all, and they've tried everything for 10, 15, 20 years. I can get them to leave their bodies and to leave their pain behind. That's nothing special, and I'm not a hypnosis expert. I just do guided imagery. We can all do that. I had surgery several months ago and was never medicated properly for the pain, and for 8 weeks I thought I was just going to die. And finally I thought, geez, Bren, use what you teach everybody else to use. And so I started doing some of my guided imageries and did the same thing. Left my body, left my pain sitting in the rocker. It works. And if you are interested in learning how to do guided imagery, please email me, because I can refer you to the best set of guided imagery tapes out there on the market. And I have had tons and tons of people buy these things, and everybody without exception has said that they've benefited greatly. And so if you tend to be kind of high energy and you can't really meditate because you can't find a way just to kind of release and relax, then guided imagery is a really great means by which you can get into a very, very deep state of relaxation. So feel free to email me if you want a great reference for that and the way to get a hold of the tapes. Play. Play is a biggie. Well, it's a biggie for me. And my students often wonder what I'm up to, my patients, the docs I work with. The fact of the matter is I play all day long. Now, if I'm in a room with a patient who is dying, or I'm with their family and they are grieving, I'm not in there playing at that moment. I'm there 100% to give. But I can do that 100% because the minute I'm out of there, I'm back to playing and taking care of myself. And some people may think that's an awfully hard switch to make, but it's not. Because play is not an activity. Play is an attitude that we take into every activity that we do. And so, you know, there are activities that need to be taken very, very seriously. But there's lots of time in between those serious activities where some levity can give you the break that you need so that you can manage your stress well. A couple weeks ago I was here doing a teleconference for another group, and I had mentioned my Mrs. Potato Head that I take to the hospital. Well, she's there. She's taken up residence at the hospital. And I can remember when I took my Mrs. Potato Head, people thought it was really strange. But what's happened since I put Mrs. Potato Head out at the nurse's station, I'm at the geriatric clinic, and Mrs. Potato Head is sitting out at the nurse's station desk, and anytime somebody comes up to check in, you know, a patient, it's kind of like they move the nose. The doctors, they're busy, they're stressed, they're doing their thing, and you can tell how their day's going by the way Mrs. Potato Head looks when they pass by her. Because they will take a couple minutes and, you know, they'll put lips on top of her head and eyeballs where her ears are. And it's, you know, 20 seconds out of their day. But somehow or another it's helping them to get out a little bit of the stress, and everybody enjoys looking at what has happened to Mrs. Potato Head. Furthermore, I take magic wands to work. I know that sounds really crazy too, but I will tell you, now that people are introduced to the magic wands, I've got one that makes music and lights up and all this stuff. I've got another one that you can do bubbles with, and it originated because I had a patient who was so severely depressed, and one day I said, you know, I wish I had a magic wand to make it all better for you, but I don't. And I had said that to my husband, so he found me a magic wand. And I took it to the hospital, and I rarely use it with patients. I save it for the staff. And, you know, I now have staff coming to me saying, you know, I need the wand. So it's all an attitude. Last week, one of the doctor's wives was having problems, so he never slept. And so he was coming in looking really, really haggardly because he hadn't slept in a week. And I said, you know, you need the magic wand. It's crazy. I mean, you know, you're not believing in the magic wand, but it made everybody feel better. And so that's just play. You can do anything. People are concerned about looking childish. Yeah, adults shouldn't be childish, but childlike is always a wonderful quality for adults. And so try to imagine how you can integrate a playful attitude throughout your day, because that's going to break the tedium for a lot of people. And everybody around you will follow suit. And if they don't, then, well, send them to get some help, because they're obviously really, really uptight. Eating, oh geez, we're not even going to go there in terms of diet. You already know all that stuff. Environmental enhancement, though, is a biggie. What can you do to make whatever amount of space you have at work pleasing to you? What do you enjoy? Do you like greenery or plants? If you kill them like I do, then you buy the fake ones and put them all over the place. They look nice, and you don't have to worry about grieving when you kill them. Scent. I always have wax burning in a little burner. It's an electric thing. I always have scents going in both of my offices. Paintings that I love, other things that just make me feel good when I'm sitting there surrounded by them or when I'm walking past. And so think about what you can do at work. I was in Toronto giving a workshop on stress management recently, and for the first time I met two people that have no workspace, not even a cubicle. I'd never heard of anybody who didn't at least have a cubicle, but they were funeral directors. And in their funeral home, everybody shared one space, and you weren't allowed to add anything that made it yours. It was just kind of the funeral home generic, and that was it. And so these two people were saying, well, how am I supposed to enhance my environment? I would love to, because, you know, it gets so stressful. And I thought, okay, you know, they can't do anything to their physical environment. What can they do? So I asked them, well, what do you love? You know, what do you like? Is there something whimsical? Is there something that you really enjoy? And the woman, there was a woman and a man, she said, yeah, I love Winnie the Pooh. And I said, okay, well, can you get a Pooh that's small enough to fit in your pocket? And she said, yeah. I said, okay, then you've just enhanced your environment at all times. Put Winnie in your pocket, and he goes with you everywhere you go. And all you have to do is reach in there, and he's there at any time. You know, sometimes you've got to improvise and go with the best that you can. But let's assume that you don't have much flexibility in terms of doing anything with your environment at work. Then it becomes even more critical to go home to a really calming, soothing space. And what I find is it's an astoundingly high number of people that don't go home. They go back to a house that's got stuff in it, but they don't go home and feel like, oh, this is my haven. You know, this is the coziest, most nurturing, wonderful place I could be. They haven't put the energy into decorating it in a way that really kind of feeds their soul. So if you can't do it at all at work, do it at home. And it makes a big difference. Breath work, the next thing, breathing and listening to your body. If there's one thing I can teach people that will make the most profound difference in their stress levels, it's breath work. And there's lots of different breathing techniques that you can learn. Some to stimulate you, some to relax you, some to help breathe away pain. I mean, there's lots and lots of different types of breath work that you can learn. If you're interested, because it is powerful and it's simple, email me. I will send you a list of some breathing techniques that I use with patients that, you know, you're educated. You can get on the internet and read what I send you and figure it out. You don't need me to be there with these. It's simple enough. And so you can benefit in that way. I can also give you some references, key references for a couple audio cassettes that can teach you really powerful, powerful breath work. And if there's only one thing that you were to do to try to manage your stress, that's going to be the simplest and the most powerful. So that can be really helpful. Touch is another means of physical self-nurturing that a lot of us overlook. You know, there are a lot of people that don't have anyone in their life that really touches them in a nurturing way. And that may or may not be in a sexual way. And a lot of people don't have a partner that's touching them sexually either. And so they're really not getting much nurturing for their physical body. We know from psychological studies dating, 40 years ago that we are beings that need touch. We need physical stimulation. And if you don't have that, then I always tell people, hire somebody. And in my mind, when I'm saying hire somebody to touch you, I'm thinking of a massage therapist. I'm thinking of a really great pedicure. You're going to get great massage and lots of touching, if you like people to touch your feet. You can get even a manicure, and that touching is better than no touching whatsoever. But I can't tell you how much I think massage does for people in terms of stress management. And probably we wouldn't have the road rage that we have out on the highways if everybody was getting a weekly massage, because it'd be really hard to stay incredibly stressed out if you had that type of physical release. And so touch is critical. If we have more time, I'd tell you a really amazing story about the effect of touch with a dying patient that I worked with who could not die, and touch kind of opened up the universe for her. She was an elderly nun, and enabled her to let go. And it's a pretty incredible story, but I'll have to save it for when I see you again some other time, some other place. Social self-nurturing. Whoa, don't lean back in the chair. For social self-nurturing, one of the things that professionals need to do is learn to say, you know what, I need help. And if you need help, go get it. Go hire another professional to give you the help that you need. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's going to save you a lot of distress in the end. And so allow other professionals to care for you, or just allow your friends, your family, your loved ones to care for you. A lot of times we've been trained that we're supposed to be the ones who are the strong ones, the ones who are taking care of other people, and we don't allow other people to have the gift of caring for us the way that we care for others. And, connecting with people outside of your area of work or outside of your career field, I think is essential. Because I know for me in psychology, get a bunch of psychologists together and, you're going to talk about your work. If I'm with people at the university, we get to talking about that stuff. If I'm with people that are at the hospital, then, it's the patient stuff. And you deal with that all day long. You need to have people in your life that can take you outside of what you do professionally and talk to you and engage you in other things that have nothing to do with your job. What I find, though, is a lot of times we get so consumed with our profession that we don't even know how to talk to people that aren't in our profession. We lose touch. If I ask a group of people, when was the last time you went to a party that wasn't just the folks that you do your work with? They'll say, oh, okay, I can remember that. And I'll say, okay, and did you have difficulty conversing with those people that you didn't know who did totally different things? The architect, the priest, the mailman, whatever. And a lot of times they'll say, yeah, I don't know how to talk to people anymore. I've realized that. I don't know how to converse outside of my area of expertise. That's stressful. And those other people can pull out of you things that aren't going to be tapped into when you're experiencing your daily life with those that you work with. So kind of evaluate where you stand socially. Look at your social network. You know, who's in your network and who's able to meet different needs. Don't forget your pets. You know, we sometimes underestimate the value of animals in terms of meeting our needs and helping us to de-stress. I have a kind of long commute, and at night I have to dodge deer. In addition to driving an hour and a half to get home from work, I have to dodge deer the whole way, and a lot of times I'm not successful in dodging the small animals, and it's real distressing to me. And I have discovered when I go home, distraught, sobbing uncontrollably and wailing and stuff because I just ran over some poor animal and killed it, that my husband doesn't quite get it. I mean, he's a real supportive guy, but he's just looking at me like, oh my gosh, you know, what is wrong with you? But I have a big husky dog, and I've learned just to go wail on the husky, and she always gives me unconditional support and understanding, maybe because she's another animal, but she never looks at me with that look like, oh, you're over the edge. You know, she's always there just to kind of take it. And we've got a lot of research that's been conducted in that area, and we know that animals are a great source of support, particularly for elders and little kids, but for all of us. And so assess your network, figure out where the holes are, and then ask for what you need and go out and do different things with different people. In terms of your psychological or emotional self-nurturing, first of all, if you're in the helping profession, you need to recognize that you're at high risk for burnout, more so than people in the business world who aren't dealing with people who are incredibly needy. And you need to be self-forgiving. Just, you know, treat yourself the way you would your best friend. And you're never going to be able to meet everybody's needs. You're never going to be able to do the right thing by every single patient, by every single family member, and just let yourself off the hook. You can't do it all. And just be self-forgiving. And along those same lines is down to the next handout there, understanding your boundaries with your patients. The patient self-boundary, you know, it exists, but a lot of times it gets blurred. And what we do is mistakenly carry people's burdens rather than just caring for them while they are under our direct care. Instead of just caring for them, we end up carrying their burdens. And there's a boundary there that gets crossed, and you need to make sure to not carry the burdens, but just to care for them. And then when they're out the door, that's it. And actually, my patients that are concerned about that, I've had several patients severely, severely depressed and a couple dying patients who have been very concerned about my well-being. You're there with me 100% in session. I'm afraid that I'm going to overwhelm you. And I tell them, honestly, you know what, you won't. I'm here with you 100% because when you're not here, I'm not carrying you with me. And that sounds harsh to some people, but these patients all feel an incredible sense of relief to know that they are not going to ruin my whole day by coming in and totally unloading on me. And so it's actually comforting to know that you're not carrying people's burdens with you. Another thing is to really look at why you're doing what you're doing, because sometimes we end up continuing to do something in a profession that really sparked our love and our passion originally, and then we kind of lose that. Why are you doing it? Is it because it's the only thing you know how to do anymore, or is it because you still love it? And learning to let go is also critical. Letting go of the minor nuisances, letting go of the coworker who drives you crazy, letting go of the mistake that you made. And so it's kind of releasing that stuff. And it all boils down to you just taking care of yourself, setting the boundaries and saying, okay, I'm doing the best I can. I'm going to be available, but then I'm letting it all go. I'm not carrying people's burdens. I'm dealing with my stuff, not everybody else's, and just letting go. And a lot of people aren't real good at that. In terms of spiritual self-nurturing, again, going back to the distinction between religion and spirituality, you know, if you are a religious person, then do those religious rituals that feed your soul, whether it's prayer, whether it's going to church, whether it's, I don't know, something that you learn in whatever your particular formal religion is. When a lot of people are overloaded with their stress and or burned out, they give up religious rituals that have always held deep meaning for them, It's one of the big red flags that they're burnt out, actually. And so one of the ways to nurture yourself spiritually is to reconnect with those rituals that used to hold such deep meaning for you. For people who are more spiritual and a little less religious, then Mother Nature often plays a role. And so it may be you going to the mountains and, you know, communing with nature up there, hiking, camping, whatever, and just getting away from the normal routine. Native Americans say, some Native Americans of different tribes say that it's essential daily to have your feet touch the earth. That's without shoes and not concrete, but actual dirt and or grass. And it's along those same lines. There's a connection, a deep spiritual connection between earth/nature and us. And a lot of times we get real disconnected from that, and that can really feed people's soul when they're feeling kind of voided out. Kind of reconnecting with who you are. And it's unfortunate we don't have more time, because there's a way you can explore that. When I ask people that, who are you? What I get is a role. I'll get, oh, I'm a doctor, or I'm a mother, or I'm a sister, or I'm a spouse, or I'm a dentist, or I'm a nurse. And that's not you. That's not who you are. That's one of many things that you do, but it's not who you are. And so you need to ask yourself, who am I? And there's stuff you can do to help you along that process, but to reconnect with who you really are, because that's what keeps you in a position where you can keep going back to then give yourself to other people. If you've lost yourself, how can you give yourself to the patients that you're supposed to be giving care to or for? And so I know we've been really, really rushing, and I've skipped lots of stuff that I normally would have covered, but I wanted to keep you on track. Look at this when you have more time and kind of reflect. See where you really stand. Look at which areas you're really not taking care of yourself in, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional or spiritual or social, and then commit to doing something. And it doesn't have to be a big chunk of time. Find a way to add these things throughout your day. So 2 minutes here of play, and maybe having something that's aesthetically pleasing in your environment for 5 minutes here and there, and maybe just sitting with a coworker for 5 minutes and having a good talk at work. By the way, researchers have found that it's real helpful to get together with your coworkers to kind of vent, but it's only helpful for the first 10 minutes. So it's stress reducing the first 10 minutes you get together for a gripe session with your coworkers. Beyond 10 minutes is stress inducing. So again, little bits, little breaks throughout the day is what you really need. Beyond the 10 minutes, then you're making yourself a little more miserable. And so try to insert little things that will make a difference, because if you don't refill your pitcher, you don't have anything left to give anyone else. And I know all of you, regardless of which particular profession you're in, got into your profession because you are caring, because you're high in empathy, because you want to make a difference. And the best way to assure that you can continue to do that is to take care of yourselves. So I wish you lots of play tonight, and hopefully you are only 2 minutes over if my clock is correct here. And if you want to follow up on anything that I buzzed through real quickly, just feel free to email me. My email address is on your front page of your handout. Thank you. Have a great night.